أضحى الإسلام لنا دينا وجميع الكون لنا وطنا، توحيد الله لنا نور أعددنا الروح له سكنا.
أضحى الإسلام لنا دينا وجميع الكون لنا وطنا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل له فلا هادي له. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله، فإن الأصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثات وشر المحدثات بدعة، كل بدعة ضلالة كل ضلالة في النار. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I pray that whilst you're receiving this message of mine, you find yourself in good health, strong iman, and a state most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we now pass towards the end of Ramadan, I wish to send you my warm and heartfelt greetings of the coming Eid. So I congratulate you with the words تَقَبَّلَ اللَّهُ مِنَّا وَمِنْكُمْ. May Allah accept from us and from you. In this address of mine, I wish to address certain issues which I consider to be of critical matters surrounding the life of a Muslim and the current weak position of the Muslim Ummah. Before I go at length speaking about these issues, I wish to make a few points regarding the month that which has preceded us, the month of Ramadan. This month which has just passed us by was a mercy and a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us, His slaves, so that we may gain the extra foothold to acquire taqwa, as He mentioned in the noble verse لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may become those people who have taqwa. Furthermore, Allah extended this kindness, this gesture of His, by incarcerating the shayateen and by closing the gates of Jahannam. As a result of this blessing and mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we wished, we could never record the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which He previously had, continues to do so, and currently is providing for us in the coming days and nights. Now moving on to some serious issues concerning the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in light of the events that have been unfolding and continues to unfold. If we look to the situation of the Muslim Ummah, and particularly the land of Palestine, the very same land which is known as the land of the prophets, it continues to be under occupation at the hands of the Zionists, which is blatantly being supported and funded by the Western regimes, these criminal nations such as Britain, France and the United States of America. Is it not right now that we as a unified Ummah that we should rise up and aid our Muslim brothers and sisters within the vicinity of Al-Quds and its surroundings? Also, having said that, if we look to other particular parts of the Muslim country, unless one has been in a state of hibernation, you cannot ignore the ongoing problems, the massacre that is occurring in countries such as Syria and Burma, where horrendous acts of war crimes have taken place towards innocent Muslim men, women and children. If we look into in-depth account of what has occurred in those countries, we can see that they have experienced numerous acts of brutality by the Syrian regime and also the Burmese regime, from females experiencing simultaneous gang raping by the soldiers to acts of sodomy as means of humiliation towards the people of Sunnah, in particular the young men. Also, a people being buried alive because they refuse to abandon worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Along with these, many other horrendous acts of war crime have taken place, yet we do not see anyone batting an eyelid in support of our Muslim brothers and sisters in those regions. My dear brothers and sisters, we need to make sure that in times of crisis such as we are experiencing right now, our aim should be focused. We should be focused on what the legitimate response should be as a Muslim Ummah. First and foremost, we need to reject any alien calls as a solution to these problems. First and foremost, we need to reject this idea of nationalism, which has crippled the Muslim Ummah, which has disunited us into small nation states, and where we feel like we have no need or no concern for people from other geographical location. Also, we must make sure that we do not call to such a certain arbitration platforms like calling for United Nations. These certain things are only an obstacle for the revival and for the repulsion of aggression that has been perpetuated by the disbelieving governments. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَإِنِ اسْتَنْصُرُكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ فَعَلَيْكُمُ النَّصْرُ. But if they seek your help in religion, it is your duty to help them. We have seen the yells, the screams, the desperation by the Muslims in those regions to support, whilst the despotic regimes, they sit in their palaces and in their thrones, increasing their pockets and increasing their stomachs. So we as a Muslim Ummah cannot rely upon these regimes, the likes of Saudi Arabia, the likes of Pakistan, Qatar, or any other nation where we have these saaw tawaghit in place. So we as a Muslim Ummah, we need to make sure that we are responding to the call. So on Yawm al-Qiyamah, we can turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can turn to those people who requested our help, and we can say we have done that we have done something. However, the dirty tactics and the onslaught by the enemies of God, the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not restricted to those countries. Rather, they approach to destroy certain symbols of Islam, and that is a symbol of the Islamic attire worn by the Muslim women, in particularly the niqab. We have seen what the despicable treatment they showed to our sister Stephanie in Belgium, where she was hospitalized as a result of this crusader aggression. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect her and other Muslim women in similar circumstances. My next point, my dear Muslim Ummah, is in regards to the Muslim prisoners that have been incarcerated in the eastern parts and the western parts of the world. It is said by our scholars of the past and present that if there is a Muslim incarcerated in the West, it is incumbent upon the Muslims on the East to aid the release, facilitate that person from incarceration. So it is a binding obligation upon ourselves. So the question we need to ask ourselves, my dear Muslim brothers and sisters, what have we done for those Muslim men and women in the prisons? If we look to the past, Abdullah ibn Amr, he asked Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the Khalifa of that time, regarding the facilitation of the Muslim prisoners. He said, what if the Romans demand 2 prisoners for 1 prisoner? What should I do? He goes, then exchange those 2 prisoners for that one Muslim. And then he wanted to say to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, what if they demand more than 2? What if they demand 3 for that one Muslim? He goes, by Allah, it is more beloved to me that 1 Muslim prisoner is freed than anything else. You are not just purchasing a Muslim, you are purchasing Islam. So we as Muslim Ummah who carry the concerns of the affairs of the Muslim Ummah, in particular the prisoners, we need to follow suit and ask ourselves, have we played an active role in demanding the facilitation of our Muslim prisoners, men and women? We as an Ummah have found ourselves away from a great nobility which has been attributed to us, because in the past we were known as an ever-expanding kingdom, al-Mamlakat al-Zahira. But currently we see that we are in a quagmire of deceit and treachery, because we are living in times where the Khilafah is absent due to its... so as the burden of re-establishment is upon every single one of us, it is visibly evident that the disbelieving nations are actively working night and day, spending millions of pounds and dollars to make sure that the resurgence of the Khilafah is never to rise again. So we must make sure that we are not in a position of stagnation and defeatist, and we must actively work for this resurgence of the Khilafah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, they intend to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, but Allah will complete the light even though the disbelievers hate it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will safeguard this deen from annihilation. But we as an ummah cannot remain silent. We as an ummah cannot sit on the sidelines and be in a state of comatose and have that attitude. We need to move with one voice, with one call, with one awareness, and that is the domination of Allah's deen worldwide. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also goes on to mention, it is He who has sent the messenger with guidance and the deen of truth to make it victorious, so that it becomes victorious over other ways of life, even though the mushrikeen may hate it. My dear brothers and sisters, we must know that it's inevitable that Islam becomes a recognizable force, a moment where we have a complete authority in the earth, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, Allah has promised those among you who believe and do righteous deeds that He will certainly grant them succession in the earth as a granted to those before you. That will grant them authority to practice their religion for that which He has chosen for them, which is Islam. So my dear brothers and sisters, we need to realize that for us to have authority, there are certain prerequisites that we need to meet, and that is mentioned in this verse, and they are: we must have the correct belief and must perform the righteous deeds. And for that reason, it's very important that we pay extra attention to our tawheed, that we constantly revise our tawheed, that we acknowledge what is our tawheed, and fundamentally it is to reject taghut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran, He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله السميع العليم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, the right path has been distinct from there is no compulsion in deen. The right path has been distinct from the falsehood. Whoever rejects taghut and believes in Allah has grasped the firmest handhold that we should never break. So my dear brothers, it's imperative that we acknowledge this aspect of our tawheed, and this is what will set our vision, our focus in terms of working for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So my dear brothers and sisters, it's very important that we know that we are in a situation that we have never been faced before in the history of the Islamic civilization, where we are without the Islamic State. And so as a result, the question we need to ask ourselves is, what responsibility are we facing? What responsibility are we going to do in order to lift this burden from us and lift the oppression and the fasad that has been inflicting the Muslim Ummah? With this call, I end in this address. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fasting in the month of Ramadan, and also use this month as a benchmark until the next Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and me and accept our Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.